At Christmas, my sister found out I was a multi-millionaire, and my family demanded I hand it over. Hello, everyone. Quick favor before we dive in. If you're enjoying these real-life stories, subscribing is the easiest way to help this channel grow. It's free, it supports the team, and it keeps more stories coming. Thank you. Now, on to today's story. I'm using a throwaway for privacy, and I've changed some non-essential details. I'm Noah, 37 male, and I need to get this out. You know those families where one kid glows under a permanent spotlight while the other drifts in the shadows? That's my biography in a sentence. Everything was ordinary until I was 9. I was an only child in Toledo, Ohio. My parents weren't overly affectionate, but they were there. Dad took me to mud hens games, Mom helped me build a baking soda volcano for the science fair. We weren't perfect, but we were fine. Then one winter, the phone rang at 3 a.m. Aunt Rosa rushed in and told me to pack a bag. Mom was in the hospital. My sister Emily had arrived early, way early, and everyone was scared. She was tiny and fragile with a complicated set of respiratory issues. The next months were a carousel of hospital beeps and whispered updates. When Emily finally came home, our house changed. It became a sterile zone. Industrial sanitizer lived on every surface. The air smelled like bleach more than it smelled like dinner. And if I sneezed even once, I was scooped up and deposited at Grandma Helen's or Aunt Rosa's. When you're little, you think you're going on adventures. Cookies with Grandma, comic books at Aunt Rosa's. But kids are quick learners. It didn't take long to realize I wasn't visiting, I was being removed. I was the variable that couldn't be near the delicate system. I was the risk. I tried to earn my way back inside. Straight A's? Barely a nod. Mom had Emily's treatment schedule to review. First place in the regional math contest? Dad asked me to store the certificate in the garage so the cardboard dust wouldn't trigger Emily's asthma. I'm not still sure cardboard dust is a real hazard, but it certainly worked as an excuse. The worst was when I was 13. I'd practiced for months to play Claire de Lune in the winter recital. The night arrived and Emily had a mild fever, 99.2. No one came. 2 weeks later, the entire family showed up for Emily's elf solo at an elementary school program, where she sang 4 bars and waved. It wasn't the performance that stung, it was the message. By 7, Emily had fewer serious issues, but the system remained. Headache, home from school. Tired, Noah do her chores. Worried about a test, Mom calls to push the deadline. She learned the gravity of her halo and tugged those strings like she was born with a manual. I retreated into my room and into a universe that didn't depend on anyone's permission. Computers. I took apart old desktops from garage sales and rebuilt them with scavenged parts. Grandma Helen fanned the flame. She'd sit with me at her kitchen table cataloging her recipe cards while I coded little scripts to organize them. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. High school was my launch pad. I stacked my schedule with AP classes, pulled shifts at Sam's Deli, and joined the debate team. Debate taught me how to argue calmly and win decisively, useful later in ways I couldn't imagine. When I got a 36 on the ACT, I ran home to tell my parents. Mom was quizzing Emily on vocab for 8th grade English. "Mom, I got a perfect score." "That's nice, honey," she said, eyes still on Emily's worksheet. "Keep your voice down. She has a quiz tomorrow." Emily rolled her eyes. "Okay, Mr. Genius." That hard copy never made the fridge. Emily's B- in geography did. There was even a "we're so proud" magnet next to it. I applied to colleges without telling anyone, wrote my own essays, begged my own recommendation letters, filled out the FAFSA with my guidance counselor, Mr. Betrayal, because my parents had their hands full. Acceptance letters rolled in. Georgia Tech, Michigan, Carnegie Mellon, with scholarships. I hid them in a shoebox under my bed so they wouldn't suddenly need me to stay. I chose Georgia Tech on a full ride. At dinner, I announced it. "Atlanta?" Mom blinked. "But what if Emily needs you?" Dad set his fork down.
We can't help with expenses. Emily's medication is— I have a scholarship, I said. Emily sighed theatrically. Can I have your room? I need more space for my ring light. Move-in day, my parents couldn't come because Emily had a choir practice. Aunt Rosa drove me. She helped make my dorm bed, slid an envelope with $300 across the desk, and said, "From Grandma. Don't tell your mother." That night, alone in my room, I promised the ceiling I'd build a life so solid it wouldn't care whether anyone clapped. College was freedom in a cup of burnt coffee. I majored in computer science, minored in industrial engineering, lived on discount ramen, and graduated summa cum laude. My parents missed the ceremony. Emily had a winter formal fitting. I took an entry-level job at a logistics software company in Atlanta. Think dull dashboards, long meetings, and buzzwords per minute. But I loved the bones of the problem, moving things from A to B without chaos. After hours, I hacked on a prototype that used reinforcement learning to route deliveries dynamically, shaving minutes at scale. Minutes worth millions to big carriers. I brought it to my manager. He squinted at the screen. "This is interesting," he admitted. Then he added, "But we're not a research lab. Focus on sprint tickets." So I did what debate had trained me for. I kept receipts, ran shadow pilots, measured cost savings, wrote my argument like a brief. When I presented again, the VP leaned back and said, "We can't pivot the roadmap around one engineer's science project." Translation: no. The no became my oxygen. I quit 6 months later, took a terrifying $60,000 personal loan, and rented a tiny office above a 24-hour laundromat next to a falafel spot in Midtown. The floor shook when the washers hit spin. The Wi-Fi worked only if your laptop was near the window. But it was mine. I called the company Stratos Route. Day one, I bought a folding table from a thrift store, borrowed 2 monitors, and hung a whiteboard with a crack in the corner as wide as a smile. I built. I cold emailed. I pitched. I slept on an air mattress. The security light from the parking lot made a neon halo on the ceiling that followed me in dreams. Month 3, I landed a pilot with a regional courier. My algorithm cut their late deliveries by 31% in 2 weeks. They paid $12,000. It felt like winning the lottery. Month 5, a medical supply distributor asked if Stratos Route could prioritize temperature-sensitive items during heat waves. I hacked a weather integration over a weekend, didn't shower, and delivered Monday. $45,000. Word traveled. A friend of a friend introduced me to an angel investor who wore hoodies and asked precise questions. He wired $300,000 for 12%. I cried in the stairwell so no one would hear. Year 2, we had 4 employees, a proper office, still small, and enough clients to stop panicking when someone sneezed. We closed a $3.5 million seed round led by a fund that sounded like they invented electricity. Our first-year revenue crossed $1.8 million, not huge by headlines. Enormous for the kid in the laundromat loft. Here's the quiet part. I didn't tell my family. To them, I worked with computers. Emily rolled her eyes at holidays and called me the IT guy. Mom introduced me as, "Our other child, Noah, he does something with apps." Dad asked me if I could fix their printer, which I did because I didn't have the heart not to. Grandma Helen, though, she watched me like she knew. She'd call and say, "How's your little delivery contraption?" Then she'd add, "Remember, real gold doesn't need to shout." I started sending my parents anonymous monthly transfers, first $1,000, then $3,000, eventually $5,500, because Aunt Rosa hinted they were behind on bills. I told them I was cutting back on eating out. They assumed Aunt Rosa was covering the rest. Emily bragged on Facebook that she had inspired the family to pitch in, posting photos of handbags that I could ID as not outlet.
Years passed. We built, broke, rebuilt. We expanded to Dallas and Charlotte. We won a contract with a national pharmacy chain, same-day delivery for urgent prescriptions. The day we signed it, I sat in my car, forehead on the steering wheel, and laughed until I teared up. By year 5, Stratos Route was profitable. We raised a Series B, $42 million. A large logistics firm tried to acquire us. I said no. I paid myself a modest salary. The team came first, growth second, me third. I bought a not flashy, safe car, and a quiet house with a good security system, and a tiny backyard where I learned, badly, to grill. Sundays, I'd still drive to Toledo, pot roast. Updates about Emily's life. She was a marketing coordinator by then, very excited about leading a brand movement that sounded like she put stickers on boxes. I wore plain sweaters and left my watch in a drawer because it felt easier than explaining. And then came the Christmas that blew it all up. 2 weeks before the holiday, Mom called, crying. Her back was out. The idea of cooking for the usual crowd, 20 relatives in sweaters with snowmen, was too much. For reasons both kind and petty, I hated pretending her turkey was good, I offered to handle it. "I'll get it catered," I said. "We can't afford a caterer," she sniffed. "I've been saving." I lied. "Let me." I booked the best catering team we use for investor dinners. Maple roasted carrots that taste like candy, prime rib that melts, desserts that make you claim you don't want any and then eat 2. It cost more than my parents assumed I made in 2 months. I didn't blink. Christmas Day arrived. The house glowed. The table looked like a magazine cover. I brought my laptop because halfway around the world, a partner in Singapore was closing on a hospital delivery pilot, and I needed to be available. I set up in my old bedroom, still painted navy, still scuffed where my first PC tower had sat. Dinner was a hit. Even Emily's sarcasm took a break at the first bite of truffle mashed potatoes. Mom apologized for not making our traditional dishes, but comfortably went back for seconds. Dad complimented the Trader Joe's wine that was absolutely not Trader Joe's. Between ham and dessert, I slipped away to check the dashboard. On my screen, bank balances, contract trackers, cap table, and a live view of the Singapore Go Live metrics. I had Slack open. It was work, but the fun kind, the kind that tells you you're steering the ship you built. Apparently, closing a door in my parents' house is an invitation. Emily breezed in without knocking, hunting for a phone charger. She saw the open laptop. A smile appeared, the kind you get when you think you've caught someone doing something embarrassing. "Let's show everyone your super important tech job," she sang, picking up the laptop before I could stand. We walked to the dining room like we'd rehearsed it. Conversations slowed to a hush. Emily pivoted the screen to the table as if she were unveiling my secret Pinterest board. But the screen wasn't a joke. It was the reality no one had bothered to ask about. Founder equity, 28.7%. Current personal liquid assets, $9.8 million. Pending enterprise contract, $2.1 million ARR. Quarterly revenue, $8.4 million. Live deployment, Singapore HealthNet, green across the board. Emily's face went through disbelief, confusion, then something like panic. This can't be real. Mom laughed, light, relieved. "Don't be silly. Noah works with computers at a little app place." I closed the laptop calmly. "Mom," I said, "I've founded Stratos Route. It's a logistics optimization company. We operate in multiple cities and overseas. Those numbers are real." Silence. Then Dad coughed. Aunt Rosa froze, fork in midair. Grandma Helen tilted her head with a tiny smile like she'd been waiting for this scene. Mom's laugh vanished. Her cheeks flushed red. She stood so fast her chair tipped. "You have millions and you let us struggle? I've been sending you $5,500 every month for years," I said, meeting her eye. "While you hoard the rest," she snapped. "Your sister has loans. We could have moved to a safer neighborhood. We could have—"
There it was. Not "we're proud," not "tell us everything," just a bill presented as love. Emily started crying, the kind of crying that removes oxygen from a room. "You betrayed us," she choked. "I always encouraged your career. You owe it to the family to share." Dad slammed his palm on the table. "We raised you. You don't get to keep all that for yourself." I felt something in me. Years of being shipped out for a sniffle, of empty chairs at recitals, of being the family IT guy but never the son, stand up and refuse to sit again. "You raised me?" My voice was steady. "You raised Emily. You sanitized me out of the house. You skipped my wins because they might make her feel left out. You saved for her private school and told me to figure out financial aid alone. I built this by myself." The next 5 minutes were chaos. Mom shouted about duty and how families operate. Dad called me ungrateful. Emily alternated between sobbing and calculating out loud what a fair share would be given the trauma she'd endured. The caterers chose that moment to present dessert. No one touched the peppermint cheesecake. I picked up my laptop and my coat. "I love you," I said to the air, to the idea of family I'd held on to. "But I won't be manipulated." As I reached the door, I heard Mom mutter, "We'll need to talk about Emily's MBA and maybe a down payment." Emily sniffed, "And a car that's safe in winter," as if they were divvying up party favors. I drove home through quiet streets, the kind of cold that turns breath into ghosts. My phone lit up like fireworks. Missed calls, texts, then a family group chat unraveling itself into a public spectacle. Emily posted a long dramatic Facebook status about hidden wealth and moral obligation. Distant cousins, people I hadn't seen since middle school, chimed in with opinions and emojis. By morning, my office manager Jada pinged me. "Heads up, your parents and sister are in the lobby. They say they have an appointment." I walked out to find them seated like clients. Emily had a designer tote on her arm and a clipboard she didn't need. Mom smiled the way people do before demanding something. "We've had a family meeting," Mom began, "and we think the sensible thing is for you to set up trust funds. One for Emily, for her MBA and a condo. One for us so your father can retire. We're not being unreasonable." Dad added, "Florida would be good for your mother's back." I blinked. "You realize I've been sending you money every month?" "That's kindness," Mom said. "This is the right thing." What did I get as a kid? When I was alone practicing piano in an empty auditorium? When you missed my graduation? What do you think I owe you, exactly? Emily wiped a dry eye. "At least $2 million to start," she said, like she was ordering a sandwich. I took out my phone and, without breaking eye contact, canceled the monthly transfers. Mom gasped. Dad surged to his feet. "You can't do that," he said. "I can, and I just did. You're not entitled to my work." Security escorted them out when they refused to leave. Jada asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, and then added their names to a do not admit list. The calls continued for weeks. Numbers I didn't recognize, emails with subject lines like, "You owe us," even messages sent to our customer support portal. My lawyer drafted a letter explaining harassment and legal consequences. The noise quieted. Mom called Grandma Helen. That was her final card. Grandma listened. Then she called me. "Good," she said. "I wondered when you'd pick yourself." She sent me a photo later. Her holding a tiny paper sign that read, "Proud of you." It's been 7 months since that Christmas.
I moved to a new house with better security cameras. We launched in 3 more cities. The Singapore pilot turned into a national hospital network deal. Revenue is up. My therapist says boundaries are like muscles. Mine were atrophied, and now they're learning. Emily still posts cryptic quotes about family betrayal, framed by latte art. I've heard she's starting her own tech company. Good luck with that. Mom and Dad tell relatives they never wanted a dime anyway, and that they're praying for me. I hope they're also budgeting. Sometimes I drive by that old laundromat in Midtown and look up at the window where the Wi-Fi only worked at a certain angle. I remember folding tables and cold pizza and the smell of fresh detergent. I remember the boy version of me, counting quarters and believing anyway. For the first time, I don't shrink to make anyone comfortable. No more disguising my life in plain sweaters and phrases like, "I work with computers." No more funding the storyline where I'm the supporting character. I still visit Grandma Helen. She sits with me in my home office while I review dashboards, and she pretends to understand them all. We drink tea. She tells me my posture is terrible and that I should eat more soup. We laugh. And if you're reading this, Emily, that limited edition tote you posted last week, it's not. The stitching gives it away. Just saying. Thanks for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, it helps more than you know. Tap the bell to stay updated on more true stories happening around us.